Hey, good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. I would further like to inform you that views expressed are those of the speakers, and I would also like to share the thought that those views are not intended to represent WRFU, UC IMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the television version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our, in this instance, I mean myself and my charming guest, who will hopefully introduce herself right now.
Hi, my name is LaKisha David. I'm a PhD student at the University of Illinois.
Welcome, LaKisha.
Thank you.
How are you?
Doing well.
Are you enjoying this weather?
I am.
Isn't it awesome? Do you drive?
No.
Okay.
Just the bus.
I didn't want to make any assumptions, but most students I know don't drive because it's pain to have a car and park it and all that stuff. So you're dependent on like buses and walking and everything. And
right.
I used to walk to work every day for a long time, and it's amazing how much the weather affects that experience. You know, it can be miserable. It can be wonderful. You know, I mean, there were days I can remember it'd be like, I feel so great today just because it was so nice out. And you miss that when you're in a car. You're in a car, you know, just kind of get in, oh, it's nice out, in your park, you know, and then you're done. So I'll bet it's been pretty cool the last couple of days. Of course, this is only Monday, so.
Yeah, but the weather's been nice.
Yeah.
It's been good.
So last time we talked about your experiences as an urban planner, but this time, hopefully, you're going to share your project. You're working on a project.
Right.
Is this for that class, or
it's not?
It's something else? Okay.
Yeah, it's a separate project, an independent project that I hope will lead into maybe other projects in the future. So it's the African CU Family Reunion Project is what I'm going to talk about today. African
CU Family Reunion.
Yep.
So does that mean, what does that mean?
Okay. Well, I'll just sort of describe it a little bit.
Okay.
All right. You know, got some notes here. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's based off of the trend of African Americans doing their DNA testing to find their African ethnic group or country of origin. And so that's based off of, call it the Y DNA test for the male line, and the mitochondrial DNA test for the maternal line. And so, well, this sort of African American connection is not new. They've been trying to connect in this way, but right now, African countries like Ghana are receiving 10,000 visitors every year. African Americans, African Brazilians, Jamaicans, and so forth, and they're mostly going to places like Elmina, where the slave castles are. And so, so people are going there to sort of reconnect with their roots, so to speak. Even if 5,000 have even chose to relocate permanently. Yeah. So what's interesting though is that those who are testing using the DNA test are, instead of just picking somewhere in Africa randomly, they are picking the countries where the DNA tests are indicating that they're from. So,
okay. So it's an attempt to sort of search out where I came from, or where my family came from. Yeah, so in my case, I did the test, and it showed that I'm from Gabon, at my paternal side. And so, like in my case, I would now want to go to the Akele people of Gabon, according to this DNA test, showing where I was from. All right, so, okay. So like when some of the African Americans are going to these places, some of them are participating in naming ceremonies. They are even receiving land within the ethnic group communities, and some are receiving citizenship based off of this DNA test. So like Isaiah Washington received citizenship in Sierra Leone. Sullivan received citizenship in Nigeria, I believe it was, just based off of the DNA test and probably some other issues. But one of the main limitations of the Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA test is that whereas they're indicating the tribal levels, they're not showing the family level. So, a tribe could be thousands, maybe even millions of people, but it's not connecting people to the actual family group that they're from. Is there a way of doing that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And that's what my project is getting into.
Gotcha.
So I think from the I guess, testimonies of some of the African Americans, it seems that they're not just looking for a place of origin or an ethnic group of origin, but the family of origin. And so this project that I'm doing, I'm trying to encourage first-generation African immigrants to do the autosomal DNA test. And with this test, the companies are able to compare all the people that test to see how they're related, right? And so of those that are related, they show up on a list, right? So you get to these results, and you have your ethnicity group, and then you have a list of matches. And so if the first generation African immigrant find relatives in a database, I'm encouraging them to contact these, which tend to be African Americans, and then I'm asking if I can follow that process of family formation and community formation. So, and then once a year, I would like to invite all of those found or discovered African American cousins to see you for festivities and for information sharing. So essentially what it's about is restoring families that was torn apart through the transatlantic slave trade.
So, okay, I've got like about 100 questions. Let me let's see if I can pick one. All right, well, one is, are there sufficient numbers of people in these countries of origin who have been tested to make this at all precise?
Okay, that's exactly what the debate was at a time. You know, are these tests even accurate? Can we trust these tests, right? So, and I'll just name some of the commercial names. So one company is African Ancestry, and what they decided to do was focus solely on the African continent.
Okay.
And they're saying that they went and they test, just select people from the countries according to history and things like that, so that when customers test, their DNA can be compared to that database that they have. So
they're just doing random, like in areas, towns, like what? How? It's
how
precise?
I would say it's an educated guess. Because they are using history to say, okay, this population are likely to have had people captured and taken to the U.S., right?
I see.
So it's based off of that. But the problem is that some of these countries have hundreds of different ethnic groups.
Yeah.
And so maybe you pick only 5, and you're, there's like, the 95 that you're not been able to compare to, right?
Right.
So there's a difference between that DNA test and the new version that's popular now, the autosomal DNA test, which says that anyone can test, like European, anyone can test, and all they're doing essentially is just comparing your DNA with anybody else in the database to see if you're related. They do have ethnicity estimates, but my project is focusing on the relationship confirmation.
Okay, let me point out this word related here. What do you mean when you're using that word?
Okay. So, for instance, my mother and I have tested, and my grandfather tested.
Right.
In my results, it shows that immediate family for my mother and close family for my grandfather.
Right.
Right? And so what I mean is related is any other biological relationship. It would show that we might be 4th cousins, we might be 5th cousins, based off of how much of our DNA compare, or is similar.
So, okay, pardon me for being stupid, but I understand DNA in a general sense, but is it like, so let's say we were identical twins. How close would our DNA match? Would it be like exactly the same, or 99% the same, or
yeah,
what?
I haven't memorized the percentages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close.
Yeah, like I haven't, I don't really want to say because I haven't really memorized it. But like for instance, I would have 50% of my DNA would match my mother. 50% would match my dad.
Your father.
Right.
So really, the farther back you go, the smaller it becomes.
Percentage. Yeah.
So you're talking about people who've been away from this on a different continent for generations.
Yeah.
What how
How can
you get to, well, you're talking about reuniting families, and so that's where I'm getting confused, because I can see country of origin. You could say, well, I'm definitely traced back to this country, or at least this area, northern Africa or southern, whatever. But how are you getting to families? Is it that precise, or are we talking educated guesses again here?
Okay, and so I'm going to talk about the autosomal DNA test.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the one that's showing the cousin matches.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's sort of, I guess, a general misunderstanding is that many African Americans are not hundreds of generations separated from the continent.
Well, not hundreds, but
so like 10,
10.
So, like, for instance, my grandfather is 2 generations separated from the continent. His grandfather was taken from Gabon and transported to Georgia as a slave. And so, like, he is an African American, as you would, tend to generalize African Americans, but he's only 2 generations apart. So I say that to say that many of the the people that came later, like the Africans that came later, like in the 1800s maybe, they're showing up. They're showing up. So, like, I have examples from 2 people.
Oh, okay.
Results. So one is Rhoda Quagrain. She's from Ghana, and she's showing a 4th generation, like a 4th cousin. And then there's another one, Richard. He's showing like his are showing like 5th to 8th generation. But my point is that it's not so far that you can't pick up similarities in the DNA.
Okay.
That's
Okay, so I guess it depends on when your ancestors came over.
Right,
like if it was the early 17, or even 1600s, like if they came over with the Spanish or the French or whatever. I mean, you could go pretty far back. There's a lot of sugarcane in the islands was being harvested by slaves in the 1600s, something like that?
I think, as far as I know, started about 1500s.
Yeah. So then some of those descendants of those people could have been brought up to North America, so there could have been a really, like, wild path that probably isn't very easy to trace, but that would be a long way back to, like, make that. So I guess it depends on
right.
You don't know.
That's what makes this DNA, the record that's in our DNA, so fascinating. Because you can kind of track some of it. So
let me play devil's advocate here. What could go wrong with this? How could this be misused?
Well, I mean, I don't know, it's common knowledge or not, but DNA has been used to talk about being a pure ethnic group, or so to speak. There's been showing, or fake science saying that, like, one particular group, say Africans, are genetically inferior to other groups and things like that.
So junk science, it could be misused by junk science.
Yes. Okay. At the same time, say, Ancestry DNA does have an ethnicity estimate, and it will say 100% African, 96% African, in my case 86%. What they're really saying is about 86% of my ethnicity comes from this area, but it could easily be misused to say, oh, I'm more African than you are, which you can't do that by biology.
Okay, I know we were talking earlier before the camera was rolling about some different things, and I was telling you about my ex-wife who is Native American. Now, I know there are a lot of identity problems with Native people because of the way that the colonizing people have just ripped apart families and groups and dislocated people and everything. So there are a lot of different problems that people go through, where it's like, well, I was raised on a reservation, so I'm more Native than you are because you're from a city or whatever. I'm pure-blooded this, and you're only whatever. And there are lots of things, just frustrating. It's petty, but it's still serious for the people who are going through it, because they're looking at kind of an identity thing. Is there that kind of, what would you call, identity policing that takes place in the African or African American community that you're aware of?
I think as I go forward, I will discover more of that. Right now, I'm more familiar with what's going on in the African American population as far as, you know, identity politics. Some, I can say this much, that some full-on embrace the African ancestry, even if it's just some vague idea of being from Africa.
Yeah.
You know? And some would really not consider themselves African, just American, and there's a lot of history behind that. We can go into that. Yeah. So I'll start with the history of the U.S. Anything associated with Africa was considered backwards, was considered, you know, just every negative thing that you can name. And so to say, you know, especially as African Americans trying to be a little bit more outwardly mobile, to then say, I am African, you're sort of, you know, sort of limiting your options in a way, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. Yeah.
Well,
what
you were just saying, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I just kind of.
My mouth doesn't work today for some reason. But one of the problems with whiteness as a what would you call it, as the norm, the U.S. norm, the United States norm, is that it privileges European history, or this constructed kind of weird sort of European history mingled with political history, so that they trace their roots back to like ancient Greece and Rome, you know, which doesn't make any sense because ethnically speaking there's no real connection. But you know, the British like to think of themselves as basing their system on, you know, Roman law or whatever. So there's this there's this privileging in the U.S. and of that European ancestry, which goes back, which the flip side of privileging one sort of thing is to denigrate another one, which is kind of what you're saying. So like Africa and Asia, those are like not quite so good, but Europe, Rome and Greece, you know, that's a good thing. That's like the peak of civilization as it rises in kind of the American myth, and you know, and the culmination being United States, which is like the best of all of that sort of thing. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I get what you're saying about how if you say, well, I am African descendant, it's like, oh well, yeah, it's too bad you didn't come from France, or you know.
Right, so it's complicated because I would say this though. Going back to something that you said, I do want to make it clear that reclaiming African ethnicity, reclaiming family, isn't the same thing as putting down another group.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not that. But it is complicated to do that in a society that will reject you because of blackness or because of Africanness. And so I think in some ways it's a form of resistance to the dominant narrative, of course.
Yeah.
When you're saying, you know, I don't care what it costs me, I want to love my family. I want to reclaim my family. Even if it means like forming those real relationships, like going back to Africa, things like that. So.
Well, there's a whole, we really need to somehow, and I'm not sure who's going to take this job on because it's a huge one, but somehow rewrite the accepted history of the world to include the histories of all people who have done everything, instead of just, like I was saying, just this one narrow kind of pathway that's been encoded into our history to the point where that's all anybody really knows well. You know, there are specialists, there are people that study other things, but you know, at least in this country, the history that we know is like, well, let's see, the Egyptians built the pyramids, and then you know, the Romans, I mean, the Greeks took over and they invented, you know, philosophy, and then the Romans took over, and you know what I mean? It's like this very.
I know exactly what you mean. Now, imagine you're an African American child. You know, your parents are telling you, you know, you're from Africa, you're ancestry from Africa, but when you go through school, you learn nothing about Africa. There might be a footnote, and that reference is usually in a negative way. You know, and year after year after year, you're learning how your people are defeated, your people are this and another, your people made no contributions, which is a total lie.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and everything that's European or whatever is better, is, you know, and to conquer is somehow good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It does not create an environment where you would really appreciate the educational system.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to restructure at least the history in like the K through 12 to make all people feel included in U.S. history, because a lot of people were involved other than Europeans.
Yeah, well, not just to make people feel included. That is a good goal, but to tell an accurate story.
To tell an accurate story, yeah.
Because if you, and I think you put your finger on something really important there when you said to make people feel included. That's kind of how it's sold, and that's kind of how it's resisted. Okay. If you think about it in the media, like people say, well, these children are feeling underrepresented, and people are going, well, that's, you know, too bad. That's history. That's just what happened. You know, it's like the story, it just exists, and it's too bad if you don't like it or if it doesn't work out for you. You know, that's kind of the argument that I hear people making about this kind of stuff, and it's like, no, that's not the story. That is a story. That's somebody invented that story. Right. You know.
So you're saying the way to sell it is to say that this is a accurate history, or more accurate history.
This tells what happened, who did what, and when, and why. And most of the glory in our history that we read today is something really pretty bad. It's about empire building. It's about colonialism. It's about destruction of cultures, and that's, as long as we glorify that, you're always going to have a hard time talking people out of wanting to do that at some point. When, you know, I mean, think of recent wars in the Middle East. People are going, well, we should just go bomb them. Why? Because, well, because they're acting up over there. You know, they're causing problems. It's annoying. It threatens our interests. It's like, what do we have to do with that? Well, how is that us? How do we have that right? We have that right because we have this entire history of colonialism where might makes right. And so, you see what I'm saying? It's like it's a foundation that we're building on. And if we don't change that structure or that thought pattern, you know, that way of looking at it, then we're always going to have that kind of thinking, I think. Could be just me. No. Sorry, I don't mean I'm ranting at you.
No. This is good.
I'm ranting. Well, this is something that just bothers me. I mean, one thing about this show, I suppose I should mention the show. It's CU Immigration here. We're talking about immigration, and we talk about people moving. And one thing that I'm trying to do with the show is humanize people. Yeah. You know, humanize these people. So it's like somebody coming from somewhere else. Well, it's like you coming from across town to be here. Well, you're immigrating from campus town to Urbana, or you know what I mean? It's like you're just moving from place to place. Right. People are moving around, and they do it for various reasons. And that's what immigration is. So one thing about the show that I'm always trying to push at people is like, this is just people. Think of it. They're families. They're human beings. They have lives. You know, they're coming here for a reason. And this idea that you should get rid of them or put up walls or do all that kind of stuff is like, that's really weird. That's a really strange thing to do. But if you're not thinking of it as people, then it doesn't seem so strange. It's more like, well, there's some nuisance. There's some problem happening over here. We want to get rid of this problem. You know? So I think that kind of relates to your project in a way.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So, like, as people are finding out that they have cousins, that, you know, African-American cousins, in my case, I'm a fifth generation, so, like, fifth generation on, with first generation Africans, I am hopeful that people will begin to identify with each other differently and to just, you know, to be able to see family than the other person, right? And so, I think that this is a way to bring people together in a new way, you know, and to begin to see someone who may be really different from them as, you know, my sister, my brother, my cousin. You know, so I'm hoping to be able to use it for some, you know, greater purpose.
Yeah, I like that. I think this is a really cool thing. You know, one of the most instructive and also really disappointing things that happened to me was, this was about maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I was working on some activism stuff on campus, you know, like fighting some sort of social. Yeah, I'm always fighting something, and I was trying to organize with people, you know, and so we talked. It was based around the old Native mascot thing that they used to have here. So what we were trying to do was talk people into seeing that this is their problem too. You know, this isn't just a Native issue. Like, you know, if you're an Indian, you should be upset about it, but if you're anybody else, well, who cares? It's not my problem. So anyway, one of the things that someone thought would be fertile ground was talking to some of the international students. And so we talked to the African American students on campus, and they were like behind, you know, really behind this thing. And so we started talking to some actual African students, and they were like, that's nothing to do with me. I've no, you know, they were looking at all issues, not just because it's a different country, but even, you know, they were saying that the African American students have nothing to do. You know, we have nothing to do with each other. You're Americans. We're Africans. It's something completely different. And I was just like, whoa, that's weird, because it had never occurred to me that that would even happen. You know, that someone would not see that connection. And also it showed me the limits of my thinking, you know, how I was like, I don't want to say stereotyping, but sort of kind of, I suppose, being racist in a way of just going, well, hey, you look the same, you know, and you're related, so you must have the same issues. You know what I mean? It was just like a really narrow-minded way of looking at this thing. So it was really disappointing to me on a number of levels to realize that I wasn't understanding the way people were thinking about themselves and each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to dig into this a little bit more. So
Okay.
the conflict between
Okay, we
African
actually may have to do this in part 2 because we're about 2 minutes away from finishing part 1. Can you stick around for the second half
Sure.
of the show? Okay. I want to thank you so much for coming here. This has been an interesting conversation, and we'll end for today, and then we'll just start up again